On the morning of December 2, 2022, a group of hunters pushing through the dense brush of a South Georgia swamp stumbled across something that made them stop cold. Lying in a drainage ditch, barely visible through the undergrowth, were the partial remains of a human being, a woman. No identification. No one looking for her, at least not yet. One of the hunters later said he thought at first it was a mannequin. It didn't look real. But it was. By the time investigator Jack Frost arrived at the scene, law enforcement had already begun to understand the gravity of what they were dealing with. Frost, who worked with the Liberty County District Attorney's Office, walked the area personally. He described the ditch where the torso had been found. He noted what had been left behind nearby: a razor-sharp Milwaukee brand knife, a plastic storage tub with what appeared to be traces of blood, and a package of cleaning wipes. Someone had been methodical. Someone had known exactly where they were going. The location was so remote, so deliberately isolated, that Frost later said it would take local knowledge to find it. It would take 5 more days of searching before investigators recovered the rest of her body. When the forensic examination was complete, the findings confirmed what the scene had already suggested. The woman had defensive wounds. She had not gone quietly. Assistant District Attorney Lori Bayo, who would later prosecute the case, said it as directly as it could be said. Nobody ends up dismembered in the woods by accident. This was a homicide. But before they could pursue a killer, they needed to know who the victim was. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation released 2 forensic sketches of the unknown woman and asked the public to help identify her. The response was enormous. According to court records, hundreds of calls and tips flooded in from across the country. Most of them led nowhere. Then one came in from Virginia. A woman named Heather Thomas was reading the news when she saw the sketch. She later described how she stopped the moment she saw the face, the cheekbones, the shape of the eyes. She said out loud to herself that it looked like Mindi Kassotis, 40 years old. A Washington, D.C. legal secretary turned podcaster, a woman her friends described as warm, romantic, and deeply passionate about elevating other women's voices. She had hosted an independent podcast called Compelling Women, recording interviews with women she admired. She had plans. She wanted to build a life. She wanted children. And for a time, she believed she had found the man to build that life with. His name was Nicholas Kassotis. And Heather Thomas knew him better than almost anyone. She had been his first wife. Nick Kassotis was by any measure an impressive figure. A naval officer. A JAG attorney. Part of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, the legal arm of the United States military. He had been deployed to Iraq. He had served in Italy and at the Pentagon, working on cases that, by his own account, touched on sensitive national security matters. Heather Thomas, who married him in 2009, described him as confident, outgoing, well-read, and genuinely liked by nearly everyone who met him. They divorced in 2015. She later said they had grown apart, that the romance had faded, but she held no bitterness. When Nick told her he had met someone new that same year, she said she was genuinely happy for him. That someone was Mindi. The two had met on a dating app. Mindy's friend said she fell hard and fast. She described Nick as her fairy tale ending. They married in 2016 and began looking for a home. Mindi started talking about starting a family. Her friends say she was the happiest she had ever been. For a while, the life they had built together looked exactly the way Mindi had imagined it. Then it began to unravel. The changes started subtly. Mindi and Nick began moving. A lot. Virginia to South Carolina to Georgia, all within a few years. Mindi grew quieter, more guarded. She stopped seeing her friends in person. Communication shifted to encrypted messages through an app called Signal, a decision. Her friends later testified. That came from Nick. He told Mindi their communications were being monitored. He told her more than that. According to friends who later spoke with investigators and testified at trial, Nick had constructed an elaborate and terrifying story. He told Mindi that his classified work at the Pentagon had made them targets, that an unknown group with government connections was watching them, that a surveillance van sat parked on their street, that contractors disguised as tree surgeons were planting hidden cameras around the perimeter of their home. He told her their bank accounts had been hacked and frozen, that they had nothing, that they had to hide. Mindi's friends said she believed every word of it. She told them she was afraid to leave the house. She told one friend the situation had escalated to the point where she thought her own life might be in danger. She communicated in hushed tones, through encrypted channels, about a world that sounded, as one friend put it, like something out of a spy novel. But this was Mindi, they said. And Mindi was married to a JAG attorney with military clearance. Why would she doubt him? By the summer of 2022, the couple had settled in Savannah, Georgia. Mindi was pregnant. She was excited. She barely left the house. Meanwhile, 500 miles north, Heather Thomas was looking for Nick, not out of concern, but because a court had ordered him to pay her $1.5 million from their divorce settlement, and he had not paid a single cent. A warrant had been issued for his arrest. His law license was at risk. She had hired someone to help track his movements and had traced him through several states. She knew he had ended up somewhere in Georgia. She had no idea how close she was to the truth. Just after Thanksgiving 2022, Mindi's friend Angela Wynn received an unexpected phone call from Nick. He told her that Mindi was gone, that she had suffered a sudden medical emergency, that she had already been cremated, that there would be no service, no memorial, no way to say goodbye. Angela Wynn later said she refused to accept it. She told Nick she needed to see proof. She needed something. He gave her nothing. And then he stopped answering altogether. Around the same time, a message reached Heather Thomas saying Mindi had died in the hospital. Heather said she felt genuine sorrow, whatever her complicated history with Nick. But within weeks, another message arrived. This one claimed that Nick himself was dead, killed in a car accident. Heather Thomas said she didn't believe it for a second. She had a gut instinct that something was very wrong, and she began searching for answers online. That was when she found the sketch. She called Georgia authorities that same day. DNA testing and genetic genealogy analysis confirmed what she suspected. The woman in the swamp was Mindi Kassotis. Once investigators had a name, everything they had already gathered at the scene began to point in a single direction. A background check on Nicholas Kassotis revealed that he was not dead. He was living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, under a new name, Nicholas Killian James Stark. He had already married again, to a woman named Samantha Kolesnik, a tech worker and writer who believed she had married a grieving widower. He had told her Mindi died of natural causes. She had no idea that Mindi was still alive when he first began pursuing her. In May 2023, detectives brought Nick Kassotis back to Georgia for questioning. He came prepared with a story. For hours he described the phantom figure he called Jim McIntyre, a man who had appeared at their door claiming to be an FBI agent, warned them their lives were in danger, and then spent the next 4 years controlling every aspect of their existence, where they lived, where they moved, what they spent. Nick told investigators he had surrendered everything to this man, bank access, home access, total obedience, because he believed McIntyre was keeping them alive. He said that when he went to pick Mindi up from what he described as a medical clinic near Thanksgiving of 2022, a doctor he could not name, at a facility he could not locate, at an address he could not remember, had told him she was already dead. He said he hadn't asked to see her body. He said he just left. Detectives pressed him hard. The story shifted. Details evaporated. Asked why an accomplished attorney would surrender his entire life to a man he had just met, Nick had no convincing answer. Investigator Frost told him directly that he lived in a web of lies and spoke in parallel realities. Nick denied it. What Nick didn't know was that the investigators already had more than his words. Surveillance footage from a remote water pumping station, less than a mile from where Mindi's remains were found, showed a green Ford Explorer moving back and forth along the isolated road. According to vehicle records, that Explorer was registered to Nicholas Kassotis. Frost had contacted Home Depot stores in the area because he recognized the Milwaukee brand knife from a previous case. He discovered that someone had purchased that exact brand of knife from a store just 50 minutes from the hunting club. The purchase had been made with a debit card belonging to Nick Kassotis. Store surveillance captured him on camera, the knife tucked under his arm, on what investigators believed may have been the same day Mindi was killed. Bass Pro Shop records showed a second purchase, a 7-piece Hunter's Field dressing kit, bought with the same debit card from a Savannah location. The kit included multiple knives and a bone saw. Subpoenaed GPS data from the Explorer and cell tower records from Nick's phone placed both the vehicle and the device on the same route, directly to the location where Mindi's body had been left. When detectives returned to the interrogation room and laid it all out, Nick still insisted someone else had done this. He still pointed to Jim McIntyre. Investigators tracked down every Jim McIntyre in the Savannah area they could locate. The only one they found was an elderly man who sold dental implants and had absolutely no connection to the case or to any federal agency. According to prosecutors, Jim McIntyre had never existed. Nicholas Kassotis was indicted for the murder of Mindi Kassotis in February 2024. The trial began in Hinsville, Georgia. The prosecution built its case, brick by brick. The jury heard from Samantha Kolesnik, Nick's third wife, who described feeling horrified and violated when she learned the truth. They heard from retired Navy Commander Cameron Nelson, who had lent Nick money after he claimed his accounts were hacked, and who testified that he had charged nearly $200,000 to a credit card she gave him and never repaid a single cent. They heard from Heather Thomas, who testified that Nick had defied the court order requiring him to pay her $1.5 million and had vanished rather than comply. They heard the GPS data. They saw the surveillance footage of the Explorer. They saw the Home Depot image. Nick Kassotis took the stand himself and spent more than 3 hours repeating the story of Jim McIntyre. He told the jury he was innocent. He said the knife was for a broken window screen. He said he had no idea how Mindi's remains ended up in that swamp. When his own attorney asked him point blank on the stand whether he had killed his wife, he said he absolutely had not. The defense offered nothing to prove McIntyre existed. No photograph, no document, no witness who had ever met him or spoken to him. The entire defense rested on the word of a man the prosecution had already demonstrated was a practiced and prolific liar. Prosecutor Bayo addressed the motive question in her closing. She told the jury that nearly everyone who knew Nick Kassotis said he desperately wanted children. And Mindi's death certificate showed she was not pregnant at the time of her death. Bayo's argument was quiet and devastating. She believed that when Nick discovered the pregnancy wasn't real or had ended, something in him broke or calculated. The jury deliberated for just over an hour. Guilty on all charges, malice murder, felony murder. Judge Charles Rose sentenced Nicholas Kassotis to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before sentencing, Mindi's friend Morgan Paddock stood in that courtroom and looked directly at the man who had spent years pretending to protect the woman she loved. She told him that Mindi had trusted him, that she had believed in him, that Mindi had needed protection, and it turned out she needed it most from him. Heather Thomas, reflecting on everything after the verdict, said that survivor's guilt was real. She thought about the fact that Nick had more reasons to come after her than he did. Mindi, she said she had trusted him with her literal life and believed him completely. Nick Kassotis had built an empire out of other people's trust. He borrowed against it. He hid inside it. He used it to keep Mindi isolated, afraid, and utterly dependent on him while running from debts, constructing false identities, and planning, prosecutors argued, a way out. Mindi Kassotis recorded the last episode of her podcast with the sincerity of someone who fully expected to keep going. She thanked her listeners, told them she was proud of what they had built together, and promised she would be back with another season as soon as she could. She never got the chance. Mindi Kassotis remains incarcerated at a Georgia State Correctional Facility, serving a life sentence without parole.